Okay, so hello and welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to be looking at more of my old work. We're going to go in and look at some of the early productions that I was a part of, a lot of commercial work, a lot of stuff that we did with the theatre. So we're going to dive in, we're going to take a look at that. Similar to the last video, we're going to analyse it, we're going to sort of look at what I could have done better, what I would do differently if I was to film them now, and I'm just going to guide you through sort of my first year in the video world. So let's jump straight into the video. Okay, so let's get one thing straight. For someone that prides themselves on, cinematic footage, this camera angle is embarrassing. I'm currently on a Samyang 14mm manual lens, which is incredibly wide. I would never use it to shoot someone's face normally, but my desk setup doesn't really allow for a camera on the desk at the moment. I'm hoping to sort that soon. I might get like a little mini tripod. My current tripod's huge, so even that on the desk is above me. Yeah, I know this is ridiculous, but let's just dive straight into the videos. Okay, so we've got all the files open. I've got a folder full of all of my work that I've ever done. This is in my showreel folder. This is, so I don't lose things, keep stuff backed up. I've lost things in the past, so don't make that same mistake. So we've sorted it by date. We're going to go from my first ever video I've got on here, which is from 2016, October 2016. So almost literally 4 years ago. So let's just jump straight into this and see what it is. I'm actually not too sure what this video is. Okay, so it's the Spares video. This is a music video that me and my colleague Sam Birch did at uni. We spent a lot of time on this, more time than I've probably ever spent on it since. It was a fairly simple shoot and a very, very complex edit. So I'm just gonna let this play through for a second so you can see what I'm talking about, and you'll hopefully understand why this was complicated and way above our pay grade at university still when we shot this. So I'm just going to mute this and let this play. So as you can hopefully see, the complicated thing with this music video was the fact that there was 2 people in the band and there are quite regularly 4 people on screen. So we had this clever idea that was far too much work, which was to essentially duplicate 2 of the band members on the screen using sort of various methods of cutting parts of the screen up and masks and all sorts of stuff like that, and it got very complicated very quickly because, as you can see, when I pause it on a shot like this, you have the 2 guys duplicated on the screen pretty close together as well. This guy kind of crosses over, and the one in the leopard print kind of gets very close to the other guy. So it was fairly complicated masks that had to be moved around, and it required shooting multiple times from different angles and all sorts, and it was very, very fun but very complicated, and as I said, something I've not really done to this level since. So I believe this video was shot on a Blackmagic 4K cinema camera. This is what they had at university, one of the cameras we had available to us. It was a great camera, very, very sharp. This actually, stacks up to stuff I would shoot now, purely based on the visual for that reason. We were very lucky to have that access to that kind of stuff at uni. We used a few different sort of effects to get this effect in the final video. So obviously one was the masking, and we kind of cut bits out and duplicated people, so that was obviously very fun to do. But the second one we did, which was added very late in the day, which was actually advised by our lecturer at uni to do, was the kind of artificial camera shake. So we shot this all on obviously locked off tripods. It was the only way to really get this effect and not have it be an absolute pain in the arse to do. If you're going to try and duplicate shots and have more than one person kind of twice in a shot, it needs to be the exact same locked off tripod shot. I hope to do a full video at some point where I kind of explain how to do that in a simple way, but for this it did mean locked off tripod shots, so we then had to add the shake, the kind of handheld look later on. We found some great plugins which I still use today, which kind of simulate that handheld feel. So we whacked them on every single clip in this video to kind of give it a more kinetic feel, and kind of, Bob's your uncle, it was ready to go. Okay, so moving on, we've got another piece I did actually at university still, which was a short film called Desperate Pleasures. I believe this was actually a project we had a time limit on, so this was our 48-hour film challenge. This meant that we obviously had 48 hours to kind of, plan, produce and film and edit the shoot. So based on that time frame, I was actually quite proud of what we did here. The film looks okay. I think it was shot on a Canon C300 or C100, one of the 2. So the film looks good. Again, decent visuals, fairly well shot. Shoddy audio as always at this point. So let's take a look at this one.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. Yes, sir. But
So as I've mentioned in multiple videos beforehand, audio is so important, and it's so often looked over at the early stages. You can hear it throughout this video that we, essentially completely didn't spend any time or focus on it. So the audio is massively lacking in this film, and it really detracts from the final piece. So, don't let yours do that. Now the cinematography here is actually, again, pretty decent, I think. We used some nice shots in the mirror. One of the other lads at uni actually was the DOP on this, so I can't take any credit for that myself. Now, so I feel like I was going back to the well with this shot. I'd done it in my first short film with the bookcase little thing, and we used it again here. Very Tarantino, absolute rip-off. Not taking any credit for this shot either, but it did look cool in the final film. One of the things you can quite clearly see was an issue, and something we didn't really have the capability to do at the time was light well. Obviously this is a night scene, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but if I was to go back and do this now, I'd like this, much better. You still need to be able to see what's going on, even if you're shooting at night, even if it's dark, you need to be able to see what's happening, and this scene kind of doesn't hit the mark on that one. Plenty of my fellow students in this film, almost entirely acted by students. You can't tell at times, which is good, so it's a good sign. So skipping ahead here, we've actually got a shot which I still use in my show reel today, as I'm actually very happy with this shot. We got the perfect timing with a sunset, which always looks good on camera, and we had this kind of important scene in the film take place with the sun behind it, casting kind of silhouette on the actors, and it looks great in my opinion. This film also highlights the importance of getting someone to do some original music for you if possible. I think this is the first project I worked on that we had someone actually make a score for us, and it pays off so well. Even just having a really subtle kind of piece of music, or pieces of music underneath your film, adds such a lot to the project. So if you can get hold of a composer, if you can find someone that's going to make some music for you, I'd absolutely recommend doing that on your short films. Okay, so jumping ahead a little bit, towards the end of uni now, we went and shot some footage for the Liverpool John Moore's wakeboarding society club thing. This was a really fun day out. We had a massive Blackmagic Ursa on a jetty, which was super dangerous, and we were certainly not insured to do that, so better to ask for forgiveness than permission, as I always say. We got some lovely slow-mo on these shots using the, I think, 100 frames on the Blackmagic, so let's have a quick look at this video. Now this highlights an interesting point when it comes to matching cameras. So as I said, we had the Blackmagic Ursa, which was a huge and very nice cinema camera. We also took a few GoPros, and they do not match, not only in the color and the image, but the resolution didn't even match between it. I think we were shooting at 4K on the Blackmagic, and the GoPros were shooting slow-mo in 720p at the time. So really kind of important to highlight the fact that if you're shooting on different cameras, you need to be able to match them. You need to kind of either get two cameras the same or get something else if it's on a similar level, otherwise you are going to have discrepancies between the shots. So as I said, I'm still a big fan of these 100 frames shots. I think they're really nice. They're not exposed in 100% the best way. They're a little bit on the dark side. Maybe if we'd gone back and color graded them better, we could have sort of pulled some of those shadows up. But overall, these are really good shots that we were really happy with at the time and still hold up, and I think are still in my show reel today. Okay, so now into the biggest project we did at university. This was a 5-episode web series called Uncomfortably Numb. We were tasked with filming 2 of them. We went ahead and filmed all 5. Sucks to be ambitious. This meant we had a 5-day shoot. We had a lot of different locations. I think we had 13 locations with 7 actors to get into 5 days, which was a huge undertaking. I have to credit Sam Birch for the production on that one. But it allowed us to go to loads of different locations and, get a really kind of coherent piece, at least in our opinion, that, looked kind of above its pay grade for the time. So for this piece, our sort of gimmick was that we decided to shoot everything in one shot. So we used an Osmo camera rather than the cinema cameras we had available, and this was a massive mistake. So one of the things I really couldn't get my head around at the time was this idea of shooting for the sake of it. No matter what it is you're shooting, no matter what the style, you need to be thinking about why you're shooting something a certain way, and whether or not the camera techniques or the style you're going for actually benefits the story or the project. So there was some rationale behind this. We did know that going in and shooting it in one shot would make it quicker. It would mean that if we got through the whole take, we had it. We didn't have to go in for all the coverage, for all the different angles. But we also lost a lot because it kind of took away almost all of our elements of cinematography. It meant we were very locked to this style, and it meant that we missed things. There was close-ups, there was certain camera angles that we really should have been using that we didn't because we were locked into this one-shot Osmo feel. I also just feel that the Osmos are really robotic and don't feel natural at all. So take a massive care into why you're shooting something a certain way, and if possible, don't take shortcuts to make your production easier. Again, we had pretty rubbish audio for this. We did have someone come on and actually do some sound with us, but it just wasn't something we focused on enough, and we certainly didn't kind of do the right corrections in post. So again, the audio is pretty weak. Yet again, we were slightly ambitious with the effects on this one. You did see at the start of this clip, we had the TV actually playing on the screen. That was something we added in post. And then we've also got the webcam on the laptop, which was added in post. You know, again, we were very ambitious with what we were trying to do at the time, and some of them pay off and some of them just don't, which is the nature of learning how to make films. So I've skipped ahead to a part of the one shot which I think actually does work, and one that I wouldn't necessarily shoot differently if I chose to shoot again. So I'm just gonna let this play out for 30 seconds and you're gonna see why this shot kind of works.
I miss it so much.
So this is showing the benefit of a one shot if you can actually get it right and you can pull it off, is that you do stick with the characters, you're not pulling away for different angles. It does mean you kind of can feel really engaged in the scene, feels very realistic. The audience knows when they're viewing one of these that it's one take, it's quite clear to see, which can really add to the character in the moment and what's trying to be portrayed in a scene if it's done well, which it isn't necessarily in this film. So just for example's sake, I'm going to show you the one scene in this film that actually was filmed sort of naturally, not on the Osmo. We actually shot this on a Sony A7S, which is the camera I now use, and I think you'll all agree it looks a hell of a lot better, so, you know, lessons learned there. So you see at the end of that clip there, we're using some actual kind of standard camera techniques again, rather than the Osmo. We're getting, you know, rack focuses on the item that's going to put down on the table, and it just looks a lot better in my opinion. So again, you know, there's benefits to shooting one shots, there's benefits to using technology like Osmos and gimbals, but don't rely on it. Make sure you're shooting for the right reasons and doing what the shot needs, not what you want to do with the technology. Okay, so now we're going to look at another music video. I think this might actually be the video online that has the most hits of anything I've ever created or been a part of. That's because this band's kind of blown up a little bit and do have a bit of traction online, which is great because they're a nice bunch of lads. The band is called Spin, and we did one of their very early music videos for them. We had a location in Liverpool, which I didn't like, so it wasn't a great start. And we also wanted to shoot multicam, and this was before we owned cameras, so we used the Canon XF100s that I talked about in the last video. Again, this creates an effect that I don't like. The cameras are really not very cinematic. They are essentially camcorders, and you can tell in this video. So I'm just gonna let this play out a bit and then we'll chat about why I don't actually like this video, even though it's probably the most successful thing that I've worked on. So the three things I'll pick out straight away just to kind of, you know, hammer on this video a little bit. One, we used a dolly shot for the wide, which was really cool in theory. The problem was we didn't have autofocus on these cameras and we weren't able to focus it as we were sort of pushing the dolly track in and out, which means that we have most of the wide shots out of focus. The first wide shot of the entire video is completely out of focus, which is a really bad look, really amateur, and something that I absolutely would change if I could. But focus is one of those things you cannot change in post. If you don't get that right, it's gone, so you need to get the focus right. The second is color grading and dynamic range. I can't remember which one actually was the issue here. It was probably the color grading, but you can see multiple shots in this video where the blacks are just completely crushed and you're getting artifacts and horrible noise on the video. It's also overly saturated at times, and the color grade is kind of just weak and not good in my opinion. And the number three issue I have with this music video is the lighting. Again, I could sit here and pretend that it was stylistic and that it was something we went for, but it wasn't. What we needed on this shoot was softboxes, and we didn't have them. So the lighting is overly harsh and creating really harsh shadows on that back wall. What we probably should have done was pulled all the band forward away from the wall so the shadows wouldn't have been as harsh. But as you can see, every time the drummer's in shot, there's a really harsh shadow on the back wall, which does not look nice at all, and is something that, you know, again, you can't really get rid of in post without some really serious VFX work. So this is really, really rudimentary lighting, a 3-light setup, nothing behind them, no backlight, no softboxes, really harsh shadows everywhere. Again, not great at all. The only thing I will give credit for on this video is, again, when you're shooting a music video, you have to do a lot of different takes. You have to go through it many, many, many times to give you that kind of coverage, especially if you're only using 1 or 2 cameras. So the sync elements, the way we kind of cut back and forth between all the cameras we had and all the different takes we had on this film, I do think work quite well. Okay, so now we're going to look at what I think was my first real corporate gig, something we did outside of university, our paid job. This is a gig I was still doing until very recently, until the pandemic hit and everything. This is a promotional video for a panto in Liverpool at the Epstein Theatre. Let's just take a quick look at this video and kind of what it's all about. As you can see, graphic design is not a strong point of mine, it still isn't. Now, this was a really interesting shoot for us because this was the first time we'd worked with named actors or people of kind of any real note. Of course, not to put down anyone we'd worked with beforehand. We'd had some great actors in, but these were people that had been in the media, on TV, etc., etc. Now, I don't know about you, but Natasha Hamilton, for me especially, was someone I was very aware of. So it was kind of a very new thing to work with someone like this. Her and Sean Smith were both really up for it and both really up for getting involved in, whatever we were trying to do on the shoot. So, fingers crossed that's what you get when you work with people as well. We actually had a really nice setup for this. We were on the stage at the Epstein. We had the kind of the lighting background that was on the back wall behind. We had a nice little light ring set up on the floor. That was all done by the theatre, so we didn't have to kind of do too much setup. So the only real downside to this video is the Steadicam work. So this was before I owned a gimbal, and we had a Blackmagic 4K camera on a Steadicam. Now, Steadicams are great if you have someone that can operate them properly and kind of really knows how to use it, but unfortunately that was not us at this time. So as I play it through now, you're getting this horrible kind of rocking boat effect, which is just synonymous with bad Steadicam operation. You're seeing the camera kind of go like this constantly and move around. It's not a good look. It's definitely not intentional, and it's something you should really try and avoid. Even if this was just shot on a straight gimbal and we just had the kind of sideways rotation and the different pans and stuff, it would look a lot better. But the visuals are decent. It was my first real kind of foray into doing some graphic design, having some logos come up on screen and stuff. So overall, again, very happy with this video. So the actual style of that video, with the different characters introducing themselves, having their name come up on screen, that's actually something that I carried forward in quite a lot of the promos I did with the theatre going forward. So what I'm going to do now is show you one from a lot more recently, but I'm going to show you the difference and kind of what I evolved over the years.
Malloy, and I'm playing Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz here at St. Helens Theatre Royal. Come on down, it's going to be an amazing...
So as I mentioned with the previous video, the first thing I really pick up on is the gimbal work. Having bought a gimbal of my own, this allowed me to have really nice steady shots where we kind of pan across the stage and get all sorts of nice movements and stuff that we just couldn't get on the Steadicam beforehand, or especially not with a poor operation that I was doing. The second really important thing of note here is that we now have the people actually speaking to the camera. I kind of developed the ability and got the tech and the gear to do audio recording, which means we can have people introduce themselves, kind of, sell the show in that way rather than just be visual. This really allows them to get their personality across, speak about the show, give dates and stuff like that. Kind of takes some of the pressure off the visual and just creates a much more rounded video, in my opinion. So the last one we're going to look at today is a martial arts showreel that I filmed in 2017, I think it was, for a martial artist called Thomas Dodd, who was looking to get into screen work and kind of try and get his name out in the film world. I am happy to say that this video actually did the trick. He has actually filmed as a martial artist, as a stuntman in a few films since then, and he's doing really well for himself. So it's always good when your work kind of helps promote someone and essentially does its job. I'm going to let this one play out for about 30 seconds. You're going to see the style. You're going to see kind of what we'd learned and picked up as we'd finished university and kind of moved into making some more corporate stuff and obviously stuff like this, which was a little bit different. Okay, so it's interesting, I actually didn't realize that the one I clicked on was the version of this file without any music on, but it actually highlights something quite interesting, which we spent a lot of time on, which was doing a little bit of basic Foley work for this video. When we put this piece together, we realized the hits just weren't really hitting. You weren't feeling the impacts from the kicks and stuff like that, which is obviously what we were trying to show off. So we went in and added some basic Foley work. It's not great, it's not very clever, but it does at least add some impact to the hits, and even with the music on, you can kind of feel more from, the impact of what it's trying to do. This was also a really interesting use of slow motion. We tried to use speed ramps and kind of go between different slow motion speeds and stuff like that, which I really enjoyed and was a big part of what made this project really good fun. One thing I'm going to point out, which was definitely negative about this, something that I learned to look out for and I didn't even know existed at this point, was dirt or scratches on your sensor. If you're filming, especially if you're doing work for money, you need to be constantly and regularly checking that your sensor is clean, that your lenses are clean. Go in there, wipe them, get a little air sprayer tool so you can clean the sensor out, make sure there's no dust on it. This little S that you can see at the top part of the screen, that is absolutely dirt or dust on the sensor, and there is no way of getting rid of it on your images. Again, unless you're willing to spend the time in After Effects kind of masking around that, and it's not simple to do. So make that a part of your routine. Make sure you're checking, make sure you're cleaning your lens and your gear so that you don't have to have the headache of a client saying, why is there a weird little line in my footage? Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there for today. That is a good look at the first couple of projects that we'd done. A few that were corporate, a few that were paid, and then obviously a few that was still whilst I was at uni. So, it's getting a kind of interesting look at those first couple of videos. We've discussed a little bit about what was wrong with them. We discussed some of the things that we did right, that we spent a lot of time on. And overall, it's just really fun to look back at the early work that I've done. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that little look at my early film work. Again, it was very interesting for me to kind of look back at that work and, you know, kind of in a way see how far I've come and see what I would do differently, you know, filming that stuff now. As I discussed, even things like camera movement, camera angles, you know, kind of the cinematography side of it, just I would film it so differently now, so much of it. But, you know, you've got to start somewhere. That was my learning blocks. And that was what I've really built upon, you know, to get me to the point I am now. So I can't really complain. So let's leave it there. I hope to see you back next week where we talk about something completely different, maybe something completely random, and I will hopefully see you then.